Okay, welcome to this week's episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Dai-Shihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts here in East Central Pennsylvania. If you've been following along, you already know that we're well over 300 episodes here. Anyway, um, so uh, today's focus, obviously, right, Ninjutsu self-defense. There's our cool ninja symbol down there. But what I want to take a look at is something that often people can assume. This can be a real problem, right? Where because we have the skills, because we've done all the training and whatnot, right? There can be this false sense of confidence, right? But I want to talk about the overt kind. The theme this week, as a matter of fact, the theme since the beginning of the new year, we all want to attain goals, right? We all want to get the rank, we all want to get the skills and whatnot. But one of the things that tends to get overlooked in goal setting and achievement and the work necessary, because good people, right, put a lot of work in, they're not lazy, they show up, all that kind of stuff, and then they watch things fail under pressure, okay? Or things just fall flat, they don't make it, right? It's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of like this whole New Year's resolution kind of thing, as though people think that they can just recreate themselves by will alone and not do something that's really important. And that is to go back and look at why things fell apart, right? What were the things that got in the way? Are they personal habits? Are they things in the world that we can control, but we didn't, that we can't control, but we didn't account for, right? We thought our plan was rock solid, and then as soon as the first hiccup came along, right, all those kind of things, right? It gets in the way of good people training, practicing, getting back into the program, all that kind of stuff, right? But a lot of this stuff is very subtle and it's very subconscious, right? And so these past few Kuden, Whiteboard Wednesdays, and whatnot has been to ferret out some of these things to make sure that we're not inadvertently doing things where we become, as one of my teachers used to call it, an accomplice to our own ass kicking. Okay. All right. So again, before we go to the board, I want to start with a problem that I've seen over and over again, right, for decades. Okay. And so this is kind of that next step into ferreting things out, right? Going from internal to it now starts showing up out here in real time. And the loss happens much faster. Okay. So, but this problem, right? I've seen it in a dojo. I've seen it in YouTube videos. I've seen it with beginners, right? And I've seen it with advanced practitioners who should absolutely know better. But perhaps it's not their fault. Perhaps they didn't get the lesson along the way. Everybody was so focused on learning the next technique, the next kata, developing those skills and whatnot, that the things that are not written in the denjo, right, the things that are not there that we're supposed to be paying attention to and are supposed to be wired into our training, right, that we get from Kuden, not the podcast, but from our teacher, and the teacher fills in the blanks, or it's in the makimono and it hasn't worked its way over because everybody's focused on the cool stuff, right, the step-by-step what to do. Okay, but either way, this is a real problem. Okay. And so let me illustrate this a little bit, right? So you got this Ninpo Taijutsu student, right? Budo Taijutsu, call it whatever you want, right? Faces off with an attacker. Okay? Attacker's coming in and they're doing this thing, right? Or maybe they're just sparring. Okay. I see a lot in the dojo when people start sparring and stuff, and we've got to ferret this thing out, right? But either way, right? The attacker starts bouncing. I don't care if they're like, simulating a boxer or a taekwondo guy or whatever, right? But they start this thing, right? Well, they're moving and they're doing their thing, and next thing you know, the student starts bouncing. Okay, or the attacker shifts weight, or they faint, right? Little psych out kind of things, pressures forward, that kind of thing, and the student starts shifting the same way, sinking to the opponent, sinking to the attacker in timing, right? Based on their rhythm, the movement traits, right? Of this other person. And before they realize it, they're no longer doing ninpo. They're doing something that's really, really close to what he's doing. Okay. They're fighting like him. And while on the surface, this doesn't seem like it's a problem, and we see this in comments all the time, whether it's my videos, other people's videos, right? When people they just negate whatever's being taught, and they go, just put some gloves on, get in the ring, and learn to fight like everybody else. And that's where we have a problem. Okay, so it seems logical, right? But they're fighting like him, right? His rhythm, his movement preferences, his terms, his rules, his game. Okay. And here's the dangerous part. That doesn't feel like a mistake because it's what we see all the time. It doesn't feel like a mistake. Even though Hatsumi Sensei and the master teachers have warned against this over and over and over again. Right? It feels like engagement, right? It feels like readiness. It feels like keeping up. Okay. But that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Okay. Speaking of the master teachers and whatnot, Nagata Sensei has said, if you move the same way as your opponent, you're helping him. Okay, you're helping him. Right? And we'll talk about more about why that's true here in a bit. But so the point here is that today's strategy and tactics lesson is not about learning more techniques. Okay. It's about understanding the exact moment or some of these moments where advantage quietly shifts hands. Okay? We're training, and the assumption is, yes, that we're going to do the right things to get the advantage to shift to us. But what I want to talk about today, we'll get to some things about what control looks like, but I want to ferret out some of these things where just unknowingly just bleed off more and more advantage to him. And we don't even know we're doing it. Okay. So, when does the attack, when does the advantage shift? Okay. Well, moving like him in our art equals loss of control. Okay. This is the exact opposite of what I was taught as a white belt many, many decades ago. We won't talk about those, right? But one of the first lessons in Ninjutsu that I learned was a ninja takes control away from his opponent, away from his attacker, away from the enemy, long before that person ever realizes that they lost it. Okay. Nagata Sensei, I don't know if I have this quote in my notes or whatnot, but he's often been heard saying in one form or another that if you're fighting hard, right, you're behind, you're late, right? If actually not if taijutsu, right, these principles are things that you do before engagement, not after engagement. All the control is taken care of before that initiation, right? And if he does happen to surprise you and get on you, right, what you're doing to break free from that, obviously it works with physiology and all those kind of things, but it's not the escaping move. It's other things. For instance, we have this technique in our Mod 1. It's a bear hug escape, right? And so lots of folks have seen different versions of these things where there might be a head or a hip slam and a headbutt kind of thing to open things up. We might, if the person can reach, take the door knocking knuckles and grind on the bones of the back of the hand to loosen things up. Either way, right? But I want a little bit of space, and I'm going to do the elbow thing, right? Everybody knows that part, right? But what I'm actually going to do is hit a couple of times while moving into one of his arms and away from the other one, right? Well, it's just a variation of what everybody else does. No, it isn't, right? I know what it looks like, but unless we understand what we're actually doing, we're going to forget this little piece because I can do these things, but if it's not good enough, he will just re-grab again. Now he's going to be even more pissed off, and he's going to grab much more securely. Okay. I'm shifting into one arm, so it's trapped behind me. And I'm moving away from the other one because I'm farther away. He can't get to my body as well. Right. And then whatever I'm hitting on, it's because he's trapped. Okay. It's because he's trapped. Right. So, yes, he grabbed a hold of me. But when I start taking control, right, I want to loosen things up. I'm going to do things in a way that kind of creates an opening, creates a bigger opening. But while I'm creating those openings, I'm taking more and more options away from him and giving myself more. Okay. So again, I understand when we watch YouTube videos, the techniques look pretty clear because we understand the step by step. But do we understand the technique? Do we understand the lesson? Do we understand the strategy? Do we understand what it's doing? Do we understand what we're taking away from him and never giving back? And do we understand what we're giving ourselves and never giving up? Okay. All right. So moving like him equals loss of control. At that moment, we're not playing his game. Okay. So let's break that down. Okay. So when you start moving like him, 3 things happen immediately. Okay. First, rhythm. Okay. Feel the rhythm. Anyway, right? So he sets the tempo. He sets the timing. He decides when you need to move, right? When he's going to go. Okay. Beginners are often worried about like having to watch for anything, having to watch. And the truth is, right, by need on, my guys need to be aware that there's so much in this that you can't control because that's a human being with his own brain. Okay. He has his preferences, his styles. He's looking at things a certain way. He's filtering you and your movements a certain way. You can affect them, you can influence them, but right. So we know he's going to attack, right? He's going to do something. Right? In the beginning, I may not know what that is, right? He may be so ambiguous, right? So nebulous, so unpredictable, right? Just because he's like thrashing around and shit like that, right? The more controlled, the more stylized he is, right? The better for me. But he may be so much that way, but I can control the time that the attack comes because I can eliminate one of the worries that people have, right? Worried about not just what's going to come, but when it's going to come. Okay. So, but we're playing around with another element that determines when he goes. And if he doesn't go, I only give him like 1/1000. If he doesn't go, I move, I reposition, reset the fight to 0, force him back into a reset. That creates frustration. Okay. So do that once, twice, right? Next time it happens, whether he wants to go or not, he's going to go. So I may not be able to control a lot of things, but I can control when he goes. Right? And the more of these things that I can control, the calmer I get without having to try to calm myself down. You'll hear that again. All right. So he sets the timing, he sets the tempo. Okay. At this point, you are no longer choosing when things happen. Right. You are responding to his timing. Right. Second, familiarity. Okay. Familiarity. What does that mean? Okay. Well, he operates in trained patterns. Okay. What I mean by that is, if you've been in the dojo, trained patterns. If you've been in the dojo, you've heard me say this over and over again, right? The reason we don't fight like him is because he's already good at that. He's already seen it a whole lot, and he's already dealt with it a whole lot. He knows what you're going to do. He knows how you're going to do it for the most part, right? And he already has defenses that have worked for him over time. This becomes difficult. It becomes extremely difficult. Okay? So, familiarity, right? He's now moving in ways he's rehearsed because we're allowing it to happen, right? And you've entered into his comfort zone, right? And farther out of your own. Even if you've done that kind of training before, if you trusted that and that was the end all to be all, Why are you ninjutsu? Why are you even exploring it? Okay? There has to be a feeling that something's missing, right? Or I can gain something from this. But it's amazing to me how often people do that, but then fall back on and defend old assumptions, old patterns, old habits, because it feels comfortable, sensei. See, that's more like me. Oh, okay. Well, that's a crystallized identity. And the less able you are to change to match the situation and the problem in front of you, the less likely you're going to do anything more than okay. Right? Ninjutsu is not about being okay. Okay? It's about winning against overwhelming odds. Right? All right. Anyway, third, right? Third thing that happens immediately is decision load. What's decision load, right? Well, who has the most decisions that they have to make on the fly, right? Because things are not going their way. They can't use their habit pattern. They can't use their normal routine. They can't use their favorite techniques. Okay? So what ends up happening is just if I'm doing his things his way, he's way more comfortable there. He's been doing that a lot longer. Okay? Anybody ever remember when Michael Jordan confused the fact that he was a great basketball player with he was a great athlete all the way across, and then dropped out of basketball to go play baseball, and he lasted one season because he sucked as bad at baseball as he was good at basketball. Right? So something was off, right? Okay. But as soon as we go out of our comfort zone and in his comfort zone, right, we're in reacting mode, we're in response mode, right? We have to catch up. Okay. So what ends up happening here is you react instead of shaping conditions. Okay. You're reacting to what he's doing instead of influencing and shaping what he's doing. Okay. So here you're reactive versus shaping conditions. Okay. The only reason he can do what he's doing is because what I'm doing allows for him to do that. Okay. Little sidebar here. I was just talking to somebody the other day about this and how much people will defend their position. Okay. Many years ago, right? I thought I would help victims of bullying, right? Adult victims of bullying, because that's where I came from, right? Abuse in the home, bullying in school, all kinds of things, right? And what I learned once I got involved in martial arts and once I began to change, and of course I'm looking back on this 2020, right? Signals that I was sending, both in the way I carried myself normally and the way I responded to stress, pressure, attacks, those kind of things, right? Spoke to bullies. I stood out as a target. I stood out as a good target, an easy target. Okay. So a couple of these videos that I put out, there were no blaming, there was no judgment or whatever, but at least one of them very specifically said, we have to recognize that bullies are looking for something in particular, something that works for them. And therefore, if the way we carry ourselves, the way we respond to things or whatever matches that, it's like magnets. Okay? So once a victim of bullying can see that, then we can start to identify things and work on those parts of ourselves that change. Not a facade, not faking it, but change, right? Confidence, the way we carry ourselves, not responding to the shit when it comes. Okay? They'll only do it a couple of times, and then they'll either escalate or they'll go find somebody else. Okay? I can't make bullying go away, but I can make it go away from me. Right? So there wasn't a thank you, there wasn't anything like that in the comments. What ended up happening was all these adult level bullies attacked me. Okay? How dare you blame whatever, I shouldn't have to change. And some of them got so violent that they were actually worse than the bullies that I'm sure they had in their life, because they were all for just rounding them all up and killing them. Quick and easy, at least from their perspective, right? And then there was a psychologist that spoke up and said, I don't want bullying to go away. You know how much money I make? People staying in victim mode? Now, he was really, really honest, but okay, some people want somebody else to make the problem go away so they don't have any responsibility. Some people don't want the problem to go away because they're so entrenched in the process that they benefit off of that happening. And as Ninja, if we can't see that, there's a problem. But bringing it back to here, we have to understand that he's doing what he's doing, partly because that's his style, that's how he does things or whatever. But this attack started long before he showed up in front of you. Okay? Two assumptions we need to make when an attacker steps up. I don't care if he steps out of a van and grabs us from behind, or he starts moving in on the front or whatever. Okay? He's been watching. Okay? And he has cut us from the herd. This is a predator-prey paradigm, and he's cut us from the herd. So he already has a dominant position based on the way he thinks and operates, and I'm a perfect fit for what he thinks he has. Okay? So the first assumption is he's already assumed advantage, and he has advantages that I don't know about. All right? Two, I'm starting from a negative. I don't care if you liked algebra or not in school, I'm starting from a negative, and my first few moves have to neutralize that advantage that he has to flip things forward. If I do things here that make it easy for him, then I either stay here or it just gets worse. Okay? And again, this is not just a fighting thing, right? This is how leaders can operate or make mistakes. This is how parents can do things or make mistakes. This is how arguments or dealing with a pressure, or, a pushy salesman or whatever. It's all the same. As Hatsumi Sensei has always said, it's not just a self-defense or not just a ninjutsu, not just a fighting thing, right? This is a life lesson. Okay, these are life skills. Okay, so again, here at this decision load, right? Now, again, you're busy keeping up, right? Instead of shaping what's coming next, okay? I want to be really, really clear about this, okay? None of this feels dramatic. None of it feels like you're backsliding. Feels very productive. It feels right, okay? And that's why they're dangerous, okay? So again, just to paraphrase, when you fight like him, he already knows what you're going to do, okay? This guy has any kind of experience, thug, mugger, whatever. He's got a couple of fights under his belt, okay? If you fight like him, he already knows what you're going to do. He's seen it before. He does it himself, okay? He already has defenses against those things, right? So he's experienced, right? And you have to fight harder by his rules. You're the one trying to keep up, okay? Doesn't work the same, okay? All right, before we go too much deeper into this, again, the obligatory like, share, subscribe, that kind of thing. It allows us as Ninja to game the algorithms, okay? Because if people click on these things and whatnot, then the algorithm takes that as it's valuable and people are interested and whatnot. And this helps me get these lessons out to other serious people like you who need them, who want them. Okay. All right. So how does this happen? Right? How does this happen? Let's take a look at how this sneaks in. Right. And again, this is not about blaming anybody. Right. If you see yourself in this or you recognize one or two of these things or whatever, that's just notes for training. Right. Pick things up. Okay. This is not as somebody pointed out one time because they saw themselves in the lesson. Right. What do you say? I get it. All students suck. One, not only did I never use those words, but that's never been my intent, right? My intent is to help anybody that's watching these things make those shifts that are necessary so that we're not doing things to our own detriment that we don't even know we're doing, Okay, you can fix mistakes that you know you're making, but the ones that you don't know you're making or don't know that might slip in as the pressure gets bigger and greater, right? If you can't fix it, right, whatever's on the inside, trust me, the higher and the more intense the pressure is, the more those things are going to come out. Okay. All right. So again, you've all seen these patterns. I know you have. If you've watched fights or CCTV footage, hell, school locker room fights, whatever, right? Okay. You've seen the pattern. A boxer bounces, so the defender starts bouncing, right? A linear rush comes in, right? The person just bull rushes in or just comes flying in with fists going, right? And the defender does what? They retreat straight back. Okay. Aggressive forward pressure. The defender stiffens, meets it, like braces for impact and meets it to start blocking and doing things that way, right? So the thing here is I want you to notice something that's important, right? This didn't start as a mistake. Okay? None of these started as mistakes. Okay. It started as an attempt to keep up, as an attempt to neutralize, and as an attempt to do the right thing, right? None of us, I would hope, right, intend to fuck up, intend to do shitty things when life, limb, health, finances, whatever are on the line. Okay. And if that is the case, well, then that's a whole different class. That's not this one, right? So nobody intends to do the wrong thing, right? Um, right. Again, he pushes or exerts pressure. The body naturally pushes back. So he pushes, we push back. We don't necessarily push with the arms, but to keep from falling over, right? The muscles, like if he's pushing, the muscles on this side of my body fire to keep me from falling over. That's pushing back. Okay, that's staying in that position. Okay, the body naturally it just does that, right? If he stays light on his feet, right, right, we end up sinking to stay light on ours for fear of being too slow, being too late, right? The list goes on and on, right? So the thing to remember is that's human. Okay, that's the natural instinctive response we were born with, and while some of that can't do anything about, others, stuff we end up talking about in these trainings, are things you can do things about. You can rewire the reflexive system so that you don't do that. Somebody pushes, you immediately drop to the ground or receive into that, or slip out of the way or whatever, right? As opposed to stiffening up or pushing back or getting into that bull, right? That the Japanese call it chikara kurabe, right? It's a contest kind of thing. It's brute force on brute force, right? Um, yeah. So where the hell am I now? There we go. Okay. So, but again, self-defense isn't about keeping up, right? This is not a fight. This is not a let's see what happens. Self-defense. This is another one of the words like wisdom and enlightenment and warriorship and things like that, right? Self-defense sounds nice. People think about, I'm defending myself, I'm keeping myself safe. But that's not the half of it. Okay. Because in most people's minds, self-defense equals fighting. Right? Self-defense, self-protection, self-preservation, right? The base of the hierarchy of needs is about survival. Okay? Not about scoring points or winning a fight and then talking smack later. Okay? So self-defense isn't about keeping up. It's about not accepting the game you're being offered. As soon as he starts doing things, right, he's kind of hoping that you fight the same way, right? And if you accept rules on his terms, right? And I know we all like to think that, like, we're the bigger, badder fighter or whatever, but okay. I've seen more than my fair share of people that just could not back down from a fight. Somebody said something, they went rushing in, assuming it was a fist fight, and halfway there, the pew pew or the knife or person grabbed a bat or something, and the whole dynamic changed. And then this person goes defensive, except they've already identified themselves as stupid. right? So if we're not thinking ahead of possibilities, right? There's a whole lot of things we don't know anything about this person, their intentions, nothing. Right? And assuming that we do, assuming because this guy says, "I kicked your ass," that he means it's a fist fight. Right? So again, it's not about keeping up. Okay, Nagato Sensei again has reminded us, right, over and over again, right, in one way or another, right. Sometimes he says it one way, sometimes another, but the meaning is the same, right. That taijutsu happens before the fight forms, right, not inside it. Okay, he often says that if you're fighting, you're already too late. Okay? Taijutsu looks boring. Taijutsu looks like you're not doing anything. Taijutsu looks like the other guy's just falling down or he's helping you win. But it's not because of what you're doing in the moment, it's because of what you did before that moment that made that happen. Okay. All right. So let's start where everybody assumes they already. Right, look, I'm not a beginner, dude. Like I've been around the block. The numbers behind this are just astronomical. I don't care. Then use this as a self check. Make sure that yeah, okay, I got that. Okay. Um, Kamae, right? We're gonna look at Kamae as an anti-mirroring tool. Okay. This is the first step in taking control. Not the first step in getting ready, not the first step in showing him you're willing to fight. Right? The first step in taking control. Right? Taking control of what? His thoughts, his perceptions about what it is that he thinks you're going to do, or whether or not you can even protect yourself, or whether you're open or not, how, right? Whole bunch of things. Right? What most people assume when they think about control, taking control, asserting control, that kind of thing, is they think of it in terms of force, right? Okay. The wife or the parent says, do that or else, right? The wife says, do that or else you'll be living without me and without half your shit, right? The parent says, do that or you'll be without your cell phone, without your partying with your friend, whatever, okay? But it implies force. And force always produces what? Resistance. Okay. The ninja doesn't apply force, they apply influence, and the influence that's applied is very, very subtle. Like it seems like nothing is happening. Okay. Because what I'm doing is going to the beginning of the chain in his decision making and processing, and that is his perceptions. So whatever he perceives, whatever he thinks is going on here, that's where he will start to make decisions. He'll create his plans, and that's what he'll act on. And he's already wrong. Okay? Because fighter mentality will look at a kamae the same way a lot of people in this art are still looking at kamae. Again, not blaming, something got missed along the way, right? And they're looking at these like stances. Okay? So, again, this is where ninpo training is fundamentally different from most systems. We actually come at things backwards, right? So, again, let me say this clearly. Kamae is not a fighting posture. I know. Lots of people are conveying it that way because they came at it from this perspective, regardless of how much Hatsumi Sensei, Nagato Sensei, Shirai Sensei, Seno Sensei, whatever, have described things differently. Okay? It's not a stance, even though it looks like one to beginners and to those with fighter mentality. Okay? So what is it then? It's not a stance. What is it? Okay? It's a refusal to accept his rhythm. Okay? To accept his rhythm. I'm just going to leave it right there. To accept his rhythm, to accept his rules, to accept his ways of doing things. Okay? Not going to be Michael Jordan signing up for a baseball team. Okay? So kamae exists to prevent nervous system sinking. If we understand what the kamae is doing as a control mechanism, and we're not looking at it the way most martial artists look at stances, which is a necessary evil that I have to learn so I can do the cool shit. No, the kamae is the cool shit. Kamae first, kamae last, kamae always. Right? So if I know what that's doing, right, I won't feel like I don't have control. I will know what control I have, what conditions I'm controlling. Okay? It sets the boundaries that determine how he has to operate to get at you, to get at me. Okay? Not the other way around. Okay? We don't play his game by his rules. We get him to play ours, to play by our rules. Right? He's not good there. If we play by his, he's already good. Right? So the best we can hope for in that kind of fight is equal ground. Well, it's a fair fight. No such thing. Okay? Sporting events, those kind of fights are designed, they're engineered to be fair. In this realm, in the realm of Budo, real Budo, okay? People, maybe in today's woke world or whatever, people have not learned the lesson or heard that adage that in love and war, all is fair. Because I certainly hear a whole lot of people crying and pissing and moaning about how something wasn't fair. Okay? One, not fair. The universe is cold. Doesn't care what your preferences are. Okay? Two, nobody ever said you had to like it. But it'd be really cool if you could figure out how things actually work and align yourself with that. That's what's behind the ninja admonition, ninpo ikan. Ninpo, the way of the ninja, the ninja's ways, ikan, right, are the one way or an attunement with the one way, which points to truth, universal truth, the way shit actually works, not the way we want it to work. Okay, I'll get off my pulpit. All right, so here's how this shows up. Right, I just picked 3 arbitrary kamae. Beginners tend to get these up front anyway. Okay, so refusal to accept. Right, we're not playing the game the same way. Okay, we start with hiro. Okay, it's the first kamae that I teach students. I don't even start from shizen. They get shizen, but I have them back out into hiro. Right, because from there, when they say I don't want to fight, their body language matches their mouth, and they're not saying I don't want to fight. Meanwhile, he's barely processing the words, if at all. What he sees is, he hears, I don't want to fight, but what he sees is, okay, which means he's going to turn up the volume. Here, they actually turn it down because you look like you're easy. The more difficult you look, the more they crank that volume dial up, okay? So hiro no kamae, right, primarily prevents escalation cues. Escalation cues, right? Signals. These things. Okay? It doesn't matter how ready you are. Yeah? He doesn't know that. To some fighters, to some attackers, it looks stupid. You're wide open. Why would you do that? I'm not going to tell you. I mean, you guys know, but that's what I'm going to tell him. Yeah, looks stupid. You know the half of it. Right? They're the ones that are going to rush right in. Right? The ones that like know that they've never seen that before, and maybe that's not what it looks like. Right? The good ones, the thinkers, yeah, I want him to stall. Okay? But think about hira as any of your kamae as being these open, spring-loaded trapper, like traps, right? Put the bait in there. Okay? He steps into it. Okay? He does it. All right? But hiro kamae, it prevents escalation cues, right? You're present, but not challenging. Okay? all targets are equidistant. That means I don't have anything out here closer that if he can't get to these things that he really wants to get at, he'll start picking these things off. Everything is the same distance, okay? Which is really important, like if he's armed with a knife, okay? I'll be out here trying to figure out where things are, and then he cuts my fingers. That causes a flinch response, and then he cuts, Spider-Man squirting tubes, and then it just fucking cascades from there, okay? Everything is equidistant, right? With nothing easier to get at than anything else, okay? And it's confusing, right? If you've ever looked at Hira, either you're in the beginning or you still look at it that way, wondering who the hell would do that? I would never do that in a fight or an attack. And that's exactly how 99.8% of attackers think. And the Japanese teachers, when that comes up, will just smile and say, sounds like somebody needs some more study or practice with that kamae. Because remember, these things were not passed down by frickin' morons. It is it is backwards to me to hear people absolutely buy into Kotoryu tactics, Kukishinden tactics, right? Any lineage, but specifically Kotoryu and Kukishinden, because these warriors that we're all trying to emulate created Hira. Okay? And when I tell people you know how bad it gets, okay? This is Kukishinden style. Both feet on the ground. Koto, you're on one foot. See? The stupidity can get worse. Unless you understand how it works, right? Okay? So let's look at Ichimonji, right? What's Ichimonji doing? Okay? Ichimonji denies direct access. Direct access. Okay? He can't come straight in. He can't just charge in here. He can't just put pressure, right? He either has to go around this thing or my lead leg, or he needs to deal with them to get him out of the way. To get to my targets, he has to get through other shit. Oh, by the way, Hira in the advanced levels is a bodyguard position. Hira is that way because what you're telling this guy is to get to this thing or this person you really want, you got to go through me. So the full name here is Hira Ichimonji. It's this, but positioned as a barricade. Okay? That's what it means to understand your kamae. Okay? Strategically, tactically, not just picture snapshot. Okay? But you guys know that, right? Okay? So it denies direct access, right? He has to solve distance and angle problems, right? Before he can act, right? Or he has to deal with the leading limbs, get this arm out of the way, grab it, use it against you, right? Or sweep that lead leg, right? Before he can get at you. And these things, if you understand the kamae and you understand the weight distribution and what's going on the inside and how the body is positioned, not just what it looks like, then you know that this and the lead leg are bait. It looks like you can sweep it, but the litmus test is, can you pull that leg back to Hicho without moving your torso first to do it? Okay? If yes, then your kamae's probably okay. This arm is just floating. So if he goes to grab it, attack it, or whatever, right, it moves, right? Okay? So again, if we think of them as stances, it's our first mistake. Okay? And then finally, Jumonji. What's Jumonji doing, right? Jumonji jams lanes without matching speed. Okay? Jumonji actually teaches us how to be perceived as quicker by him without actually having to be physically faster than him. Okay? You don't race him. What you do is you block options. Right? That's why correct Jumonji has 4 equilateral triangles. No angle is any easier to get into than the other ones. It's not this, it's not this. Okay? That way, later on, we can, as we're moving, we can make something look like a mistake, open something up, because chances are that's where the bird's going to fly in, because we opened the window. Okay? But until we can jam up those lanes of traffic, right? He can't be fast. He's got to deal with things to get in. The more he has to do, the more it interrupts his speed. The more he has to do, the more it affects his strength. Okay? The more he redirects his strength in places that don't matter, or man, the other thing about Jumonji is that you can block easily with either arm, and you can punch with either arm without telling, without signaling, right? You don't have to drop a limb to throw one. You don't have to go around it, right? Right here, boom. Either one can go out, right? From behind that shield, right? So if he grabs that lead arm, right? He grabs this, boom, right? We're on that for the next thing, or we can move, right? He can grab this all he wants. But if he grabs this one, that creates a problem, right? All right. So what else do we have in here? Let's see. You don't race him. You block options. You can easily block anything he throws at you. I covered that already. And just like most Komai, right? He has to punch over or under, right? At least one of your limbs to get at you, making blocking, even if you get shit in your eye, even if things are blurry, okay? Even if it's a flinch response, okay? Makes blocking easy, okay? Doesn't matter if it's this Ichimonji or Seigan, whatever, right? He has to punch over or under at least one limb, which he has to enter the trap, right? I'm not chasing it. I know we have things like this, but you're also moving as you do it. So you're moving offline of an incoming weapon to turn that weapon into a target, right, that you're going to take out, right? So, and here's a line, right? Here's a line I want you to remember, right? If you're taking notes, write this down, okay? Kamai keeps your nervous system from sinking to his. Unless we see these as stances, because I have seen people in full-on Ichimonji, because their favorite style, they're just adding on a black belt here, their favorite style bounces, so they'll bring their feet in or whatever, and they'll be trying to do that from Ichimonji when these Kamai are designed to be low and stable, closer to the ground, so it's easier. Okay? All right. So I don't have something up here for it, but we'll just jump into this very I don't know if it's the snow or whatever we've got going on. Looks like we had a little glitch. So again, I'll back that up just a little bit. We'll see what happened, right? So again, we'll take a look at distancing and tai sabaki, okay? And we'll get back to this idea of shaping conditions, not chasing, okay? So let's see. Do I have this here? No, we'll just talk about it, okay? So let's talk about reacting and shaping, okay? Reacting could look like backing up when he advances, like on the same line. Okay. Shaping is angling off before or as he commits. So the target, he can't throw a 1-2-3 combination because you're not staying in front of him, right? You're not a static target, right? You're not staying on the same line. He throws this one, now he needs to find you when all the muscles were set to go that way, and now he needs to, right? That's different. Okay. Reacting would be like blocking where he strikes. Okay. Shaping is moving where he can't finish. Okay, where he can't finish. Okay, again, so Tai Sabaki, he comes in here with this 1-2 punch or whatever, and I shift this way, and when he corrects and comes at me, I'm already lined up on his balance line, and so I don't need to punch him. He's coming in really, really fast. He's just going to throw his face right into that fist or into the fingers. Okay? This is the key reframe, right? Tai Sabaki isn't about avoiding hits. Do we avoid? Yeah, but that's like one quarter, right? because if we do correct Tai Sabaki, I've done Whiteboard Wednesdays on this. If I do correct Tai Sabaki, I'm doing 4 things with 1 move. Okay, so avoiding, right? Avoiding is duh, but are we avoiding to the right place? Okay, because this is still avoiding as well, except we're in range. Okay, right? So Tai Sabaki isn't about avoiding hits. It's about denying him clean, easy decisions, right? That he doesn't have to think about too much. He can just follow habit patterns, right? And so when I do that, right, I'm denying him these clean decisions, that makes his further attempts more and more difficult. Okay, so instead of me backing up, trying to keep up, he's backing up, trying to assert control. Okay, so and here's the thing, right? If you can't decide clearly, right? If every one of your moves causes him to reset, right, and realign to get at you, you don't need to be fast. You don't need to be fast. You need to be correct. Right? And therein lies a reason that people fight harder, right? Because they're worrying about being right. They're worried about not being wrong. They're worried about winning or not losing, whatever, when those are the things that get in the way. Okay? And that's why in training, we're not just doing kata collecting. We're taking these things apart and finding kihon no kihon, not kihon gata, kihon no kihon, the fundamentals that build the fundamentals, and drilling the hell out of those things. Not until we get them right, but until we can't get them wrong. That's not the same thing. Okay? All right. So let's take a look at why fighting means you failed. Okay? This is where people get a little thrown off. Okay? And again, it's wording, right? So we need to understand what we're talking about. Okay? So why fighting means you're wrong, or why fighting means you failed, right? So 1, you're operating on his terms. By his rules, you're playing his game, you're fighting his way, you're fighting something using his style or something that's really, really close to it, that kind of thing. If he's a wrestler, you're wrestling. If he's a puncher, you're punching. You might throw a kick in, maybe, right? That kind of thing, right? We slip into this sinking kind of thing. It's because we're social creatures, right? We don't just do it when everything's peaceful, right? When pressure's applied, we do it even more, and we do it faster and harder, right? We get there quicker, right? So, again, I've already talked about that, right? So again, if you're fighting, you've accepted his range, his timing, and his engagement rules. Okay? Whether you meant to or not. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Okay? Regardless of intentions, when pressure hits, during Kuden this past Monday, what I said, because it was more life oriented, when pressure is applied, stress is applied, when danger enters the picture, the greater that thing is, right? We don't rise to the occasion. Cross that bridge when we get there. Screw that. Some bridges I don't want to get there. Okay? We don't rise to the occasion. Okay? What ends up happening is we get reduced to our character. During Kuden, I mentioned that right, got a family member who has pretty much always been a thief. Right? Against family members out in the world, whatever. Okay. Last conversation I had with them kind of went like this. They took something again, right? People went looking for it. Where's this thing, right? Then I don't know, right? Next thing you know, we find out they took it, right? Why'd you take it? Well, I didn't know whose it was. Okay, what's the one piece of information you did know? You know it wasn't yours. Yeah, but I wanted it. Okay, how could you have changed this whole dynamic? You could have asked. Problem is, you don't want to hear no. You wanted it, you made it yours, and you were hoping nobody would find out. Okay? So when stress got applied, what got exposed was their character. Because thieves will always steal. Okay? People that make up stories will always lie. They'll lie more to cover up lies, right? Which is why we don't bait them the same way most people think about baiting people who lie, right? We get this thing out in the light, right? So they have to struggle. If somebody's telling the truth, if somebody leaves a little detail out of something that doesn't make sense and you question it, they'll fill in the detail so it makes sense. A lot of people will fill in way too much detail because they're trying to force you to understand, to agree, right? And other people will tell you a completely different story that doesn't even connect to the first one because all they care is about you not thinking that they lie. Okay. Anyway, I know it's as confusing and it's as illogical as it sounds. Okay. All right. Number two, right? Why fighting means you failed. Strategies collapsed into reaction. Okay. We have lost this strategy and we've moved into reaction. Well, that is my strategy, Sensei, to go with the flow, go with whatever he's doing. Yeah, that's not the same. Okay. On the inside, we know. Right? It can look like that on the outside, and we can tell people that that's what's going on. But on the inside, there is a huge difference between going the flow and baiting him and using his movements and using his intention and those kind of things, right? Strategically, and having that feeling of, oh shit, and trying to keep up or catch up or trying to get ahead. It's completely different feelings. Okay? We can lie to the world, but if we're lying to ourselves, well, there's no coming back from that. All right. So fighting means shaping is over. Okay. You're responding to what he's doing instead of controlling what he can do. Right? I'll say that again. You're responding to what he is doing instead of controlling what he can do. As soon as you start controlling what he can do, again, you'll relax. You'll be calmer. Right? He becomes more predictable. Right? But he also becomes less certain because you're not fighting his way. You're not operating his way. So he can't be certain. He can't bring his past experience and already be ahead of the curve. He has to make up shit on the fly because he's never seen this, never done this before. He's never dealt with somebody like this before. Okay? He has the decision mode problem. Okay? Anyway, before we get to that part, right? So, why else, right? Why fighting means you failed, right? Number three is you lost control of escalation. Right? Where it's going to go, right? To keep it from getting worse and worse, right? Okay? We lost control of escalation. Once it becomes a fight, speed, strength, emotion, damage, all that stuff, spiral upward. Okay? For those of you who've been around for a while, right? This is not the Godai 5 elements, this is the Gogyo. Energy transformation, right? The control we're talking about here is using the destructive cycle in the Gogyo to cut things off to keep them from escalating to the next level. Okay, so again, none of when those things escalate, right? None of these things favor survival or responsibility. Okay. Number four, you're relying on attributes instead of advantage. Attributes instead of advantage. The closer I get to the end of the board, the more I scribble. All right. So fighting, right? Fighting. We all know what that means, right? Fighting rewards strength, aggression, and conditioning. Okay. Ninpo is designed to remove the need for all three. It doesn't mean that we're not conditioned or whatever. But what I was taught by Hatsumi Sensei from the very beginning was done correctly, this will allow us to continue on and using this stuff correctly, right, and successfully well into old age. When we can't match a 20-year-old's speed, strength, whatever, age kicks in, arthritis, all those kind of things, right? Ta-da, right? Eventually, you won't have any of those three against a potential attacker, right? So fighting, that's what we're doing. That's why most people change and become more diplomatic and more respectful and shit, right? After a certain age, because they realize they don't have strength, right? They can be mean on the inside, but the strength is gone, the conditioning is gone, the speed is gone, that kind of shit, right? But if we start out not needing it, then if you're younger and you have it, bonus. But it's the icing on the cake. It's not the cake. Right? Well, we're talking about how we're teaching taijutsu, right? And ninjutsu, all the things, right? I don't care if it's bow or stealth or whatever, right? The cake. If you have the ability to do those other things and they will work in the moment, great. But that's icing on the cake. It's not the cake itself. Yeah, since I only like the icing. Well, fuck it. Do it your way. Okay? You know what that does. Anyway, all right. So number 5, the situation is now unpredictable and costly. Okay? It's unpredictable. Okay? Unpredictability comes in. If I am responding to him, I don't know what he's going to do next. I have to respond to it. I have to wait for it to happen. Okay? That's not the same. Okay? None of these, and again, I'm going to go back to this thing I started with at the beginning. None of these feel like failure in the moment. Okay? And that's why people miss them. That's why they still lean into fighting. They hear martial arts, they assume it's the same way everybody else does it, and it's my tiger claw will destroy your eagle talon, whatever, right? That kind of stuff. Right? It's not those things don't work. They do work until the moment they don't. Right? So, what does control look like instead? Right? 1, you decide the terms of engagement. Decide. No, spelled out toe, right? Terms of engagement. Okay. You decide the terms, right? You determine distance, you determine angle, timing, all that are shaped by you, okay? Not dictated by his advance or his aggression, right? And it all goes back to this, right? If I can take up the kamae that matches what he's trying to do, not matching kamae to his fight stance, not matching kamae so I can do things close to the way he's doing things. No. I'm choosing my kamae as a mirror opposite. I choose my kamae because that kamae jams up his ability to do what he wants to do. Okay? That's what we mean by match. Okay? 2, you manage the problem before it becomes a fight. Nagatsu Sensei, again, right? If you're forced to fight, then you're late. Okay? Taijutsu, these principles are what you do before the attack occurs. Okay? First lesson I learned, right? You take control away from him long before he ever realizes that he lost it. Okay? All these are saying the same thing. You manage the problem before it becomes a fight. Right? Before he even throws that first attack, right? And I know Shoden no Maki Kata, Joryaku no Maki Kata don't look like that. Chuden don't look like that. Okay? Get closer, right? With some of the lineages, right? But Okuden, yeah, they're Okuden Kata. But if you look at the Okuden Kata in a lot of these lineages, they look like they're just other ways of doing the same shit you did in Shoden. But it's the Okuden Kata test how well you can do that. So The goal is he just doesn't see you as a target or doesn't want to risk things. But because the kata do have him attacking, that's the extreme, right? He decides to attack anyway, but he's already failed because you have controlled so many things that his attack fails before at the moment that he launches it. Okay. So you retain the ability to disengage, redirect, or end the encounter without committing to damage. Okay. If you have to wreck him to stop things, then you're not at that level. Okay. One of the advancing lessons I got early on was just because you can damage him doesn't mean you should. But this was not a moral thing, right? It's actually a control factor. Because if you have somebody in a position where you can absolutely take them and then you give them back their life, okay? Again, you'll know the instant you do it whether or not you need to do something else, right? But if you give that back to them and it's you read things correctly, they know here. Right? That's how Takuma Sensei and this other guy in China that fought for 3 hours and exchanged one shot each very early on. Then the first couple of minutes, maybe, right? Each of them got punished by the other one, right? Because they underestimated their opponent. And then they spent the other 2 hours and 55 minutes or whatever it was circling and trying to figure out how to get something without losing something. And then they walked away as friends. Okay. So again, that leads us into number 3. Escalation stays optional, not automatic. Okay. Escalation is optional. Okay. What does that mean? I take that back. I'm going to go back here to number 2, right? Manage the problem before it becomes a fight. Control begins while options still exist, not after force has already escalated. Here, escalation stays optional. That's where you retain the ability to disengage, redirect, or end the encounter without committing to damage. Okay. Number 4, structure and position replace strength and speed. First thing my Mod 1 students learn is that strength is based on positioning, not muscle mass. That's the only way to beat somebody who shows up who either has more muscle or is physically stronger. You can't magically wish yourself to be stronger. He shows up, he owns strength, right? Same thing with being fast, right? There's all kinds of lessons in the Tenchi Jinyu Yakunomaki, in Hatsumi Sensei's Togakure Ryu Ninpo book, all those kind of things that show how to flip this thing and how to have your strikes so fast that he can't stop them, those kind of things, right? And they have nothing to do with throwing the fist faster. Right? Because if he shows up with speed, right, he's just naturally faster than you. You can't, I mean, if you got a magic wand that you can wave to make yourself faster, then you need to be selling that shit because I'll be the first one in line to buy it. Okay? And don't be a snake oil salesman because I see those a mile away. Right? So again, advantage comes from alignment, balance, and access denial, not athletic output. Because the first time you're ill, you're injured, you're old, whatever, and the shit comes, all this stuff you've been working on, all the stuff we've been working on, a whole lot of wasted time, effort, and money. Okay? All right. 5, final one, right? Outcomes remain survivable legally as well as physically. Okay? Outcomes remain survivable. Okay? Legally as well as physically. We don't live in 13th, 14th, 16th century Japan where the law allowed for you to chop somebody's freaking head off for disrespecting you. We live in a different world. Okay? So there is always a what's next. Even after you beat his ass, what's next? Not just somebody physically coming in and things are going or it's over, whatever. Got to deal with the popo. Got to end up in court, whatever. Okay. The situation resolves with minimal cost, minimal exposure, and maximum responsibility. Right? One of the things I pointed out during Kuden was most human beings, right? For most human beings, relieving themselves of responsibility is more important to them than attaining the capabilities they say they want. It's part of our Mikyo training. It's just a universal truth for us humans. So first thing we do is we remember that and we keep ourselves in check. Okay. And eventually we become a different type of person. Right. So again, fighting feels active. Control feels uneventful. Because if you're doing it right, nobody can see the control happening. Okay. That's why most people confuse the two. Right. So if it turns into a fight, right, you're already late. Okay? Control only exists while you still have choices. All right. Again, Friday we're going to take a look at some of this stuff. Right, we're going to look at how kamae, distancing, and movement create this control physically without ever needing to fight well, to be a better fighter. All right. Again, since I'm staying with Nagato Sensei quotes this time around, another thing he said was, if you're training to fight, if you think taijutsu is about fighting, then that's all you'll ever be able to do. You'll have no choice, and then you're going to have to defend your position. Okay. All right. So if you're fighting well, you've already lost something. Okay. If he's uncomfortable, then you're still in control. All right. So when you keep control of the encounter, control stays with you. Familiarity for him is denied, right? Things should not be predictable, right? He should not feel like he's in his element, right? He's not just fighting a better fighter. He's not just fighting somebody who's better than him or whatever. He has no ground. He has no idea what's going to happen next. Okay. So he's just trying. He made a decision and he's trying to make the best of it, hoping that he doesn't die. Okay. And the decision load stays on him. Okay. So that's the real win condition, right? Not dominance, right? Not toughness, control, right? And that distance I mentioned before, that's why Hatsumi Sensei's Quest video series is titled Masaki Hatsumi's Martial Arts of Distance. Doesn't say Bujinkan martial arts, anything like that, right? After the intro sequence runs and he's sitting there in the dojo or whatever is going on and that title rolls up, it says Masaki Hatsumi's Martial Arts of Distance, okay? Because he or she who controls the distance, among other things, but primarily the distance, controls the fight. Okay? He or she who controls the distance controls the fight. And that's not just physical distance, that's distance between decisions in his head, right? Decisions between his sense of comfort and his need to reestablish that, right? Balance and all that. Okay. So anytime you start responding to, and this is not just, I said this earlier, this is not just a fighting thing, this is a life thing. Anytime you start responding to and within someone else's rhythm, right? The same thing happens. Arguments, verbal conflicts, workplace pressure, leadership confrontation, same principle, right? If I'm doing the same thing they're doing, that's fighting because we're trying to be better at this way of doing things. That's fighting. Okay. So again, today's lesson isn't how to move better. It's not how to move faster. It's not how to be trickier. Okay. It's how to make sure you never have to move like him. That's ninjutsu. Okay. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I will have the doors open for the Friday Masterclass later today. So if you're in for that, great. If not, no harm, no foul. I'll either see you for Kuden on Monday or I'll see you next week for Whiteboard Wednesday. Talk to you soon.